Castles first came about in the Middle Ages as a result of a lack of a central government. Because there was no central government after the fall of Rome, there was frequent warfare. So, every noble or wealthy individual who owned land built a castle, a fortified manor house, for defense against their enemies. And as you can see in these pictures, the first castles around the year 900 were wooden buildings with high fences of logs or mounds of hard-packed earth around them. By the 1100s, castles had changed drastically. They were now built out of stone with thick walls and turrets, or small towers. Castles were usually built on a hill or a mound surrounded by a deep moat, a body of water that encircled the castle. The only way to cross the moat and gain entry to the castle was when a drawbridge was let down. Castles had a square tower called a keep. The keep was the strongest part of the castle. It included many rooms, a hall, and a dungeon. A large open area called a bailey surrounded the keep, and the bailey included barracks, storerooms, workshops, a chapel, and other buildings. From the towers, wall archers could use arrows, and soldiers could dump boiling liquid on attackers. So this diagram of a castle might give you a better idea of how it looked. You can see that it's clearly surrounded by a moat, a body of water. It has turrets, those small towers, and there is a keep. If you look in the back, there's a big square building that's rising up in the middle of the castle, and that's the keep. There is the area around the keep called the bailey, and you can also see that the only way to gain entry to the castle is through the drawbridge. And the drawbridge, when it's lowered, that structure that it connects to is called the barbican. Even though the actual compound was complex, life inside the castle was crowded, smelly, dirty, and damp. Animals slept with people. The smell of animal and human waste was everywhere. They had cold dirt or stone floors and drafty halls with smoky rooms. And the windows didn't have glass in them, which means that in the summer, heat would come in, and in the winter, cold would come in. It was hard to maintain a comfortable temperature in a castle. Castles were large, but they were never comfortable. The main purpose was military security. The Crusades were military expeditions in the 11th to 13th centuries that were aimed to regain the Holy Land, or Jerusalem, from Muslims. The name the Crusades comes from the Latin word crux, which means cross. Those who vowed to take up the cross and fight for their religion were the ones who joined the Crusades. The Crusades started because 3 different major religions all claimed Jerusalem as their Holy Land. These 3 religions are Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Around 600, the Arabs entered the city and they took control. These Arabs, who were Muslims, allowed Christians and Jewish pilgrims to visit Jerusalem. As long as the Jews and Christians would pay taxes, they could also live in the area. This map shows you the location of the Holy Lands, centered around the city of Jerusalem in the Middle East, compared to the rest of Europe. So this was a very long trip that the Crusaders, or the soldiers, were taking. In fact, it took them about 2 years to get there, so they must have felt that the mission was important. There were actually many crusades. The first one started around 1095, when a new group of Arabs took control of Jerusalem and closed the city to Jews and Christians. In response, the Pope called for a volunteer army of 30,000 men from Western Europe to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims. After 2 years of harsh traveling, hunger, disease, and freezing weather, the Crusaders arrived in Jerusalem. And after a 2-month siege, or attack, on the city fell. The Crusaders had won back Jerusalem for Christianity. Some Crusaders stayed behind in the city. Those who went back brought new foods and new forms of culture to Europe. As you look through the information on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Crusade, as well as the 5th Crusade, which was known as the Children's Crusade, you can see that no effort after the First Crusade was nearly as successful for the Christians. The Crusades meant different things to different types of Christians. For knights, the Crusades were a chance to use their fighting skills, something they enjoyed and did well. They were delighted to have such a worthy battle to fight for the cause of Christianity. For peasants, the Crusades represented a chance to escape from their dreary life in the feudal system. The Pope promised that if they died while fighting a holy crusade, that these peasants would automatically be welcomed into heaven. For others, the Crusades were simply a chance to have an adventure, and perhaps to even get rich. The most important thing to know about the Crusades is not that the Christians gained back the Holy Land. In fact, the Christians could never hold on to the Holy Lands for that long. The main effect of the Crusades was social. It was cultural diffusion, which means the spreading of culture from the area of the Holy Lands back to Europe. Because of the Crusades, Europeans became interested in goods from the Middle East and Asia, and this would go on to cause some major changes in Europe in decades to come.